Well, folks, yet another video, hopefully that helps you to get some clarification on what it is I'm looking for from you. This video is dedicated to the concept of the hiring matrix. And I should say and start that this is a theory or a concept that I believe has great value in helping you make decisions. But you may find in the real world that it doesn't really exist on paper. I'm going to ask you to create one on paper. Whether you in the real world create one on paper or whether you just have one in your head doesn't really matter to me. What's important to me is that you at least think through the process of what would be on that paper if it existed, so that you've got the right things in your head if it doesn't exist. The purpose of the matrix is to help you identify what's important to make a decision and to put a value on that thing as you look at a particular candidate. So what I want you to do on your matrix is, first of all, brainstorm what's important as you make a decision. It may be things, there may be some things related to the resume and their cover letter. Was it well written? Was it designed well? Did it use space well? Were there any errors? Was it comprehensive and complete? Any of those things, all of those things. You don't want to just say, was their resume good? Because you got to be able to distinguish different types of good. So the more pieces you have to a thing like a resume, the more you begin to see little subtle differences between your candidates. Everybody might have a good resume, but somebody might be really good in terms of the layout. Somebody else may be really good in terms of the content. Somebody else may be really good in terms of the flow. And so being able to distinguish all those little pieces or facets of the resume is important. So the more you put about that, the better. Related to your interview, you certainly want things like, are they on time? Are they dressed well? Are they friendly? But you also want things like, how they answer question number one, because somebody answers question one well, but not question two, and somebody else answers question two pretty well and question three exceptionally well. So each of your questions helps you to make a decision. Afterwards, maybe part of it is, did they send you a thank you note? That may be a disqualifying feature if they don't, but it may be bonus points if they do. So think about everything that's important and try to design that on a sheet of paper to where you can distinguish one characteristic from another, one candidate from another. I don't want to give you access permanently to some samples because I don't want to lead you to a particular answer, but I'm going to show you a couple on this video just so that you have a concept. The biggest challenge right now for most people who are where you are in this class is not what do I think is important, but how do I design the thing? I have no frame of reference as to what it might look like. So I'm going to show you what two examples are that they might look like, and then you try to recreate it in a way that makes sense to you. After you've submitted the thing, I'll give you access to both of these so you can customize it with what you've already designed. But I don't want you just to default to one of these, all right? And I almost didn't give you the job description a while back because I don't want you to default to that. I want you to use it as a template or a model to design your own. And that's the same thing with this hiring matrix. You might use it as a template. But if I give you the template too early, you might default to that and not really factor in what's important to you. All right, so let me try to share my screen here. We're going to go to Word. Here is one example from the past. This person would print out. Ideally, you're going to put you're going to create it all on the front side of one page, or maybe you flip the page over, but you don't go beyond that. And you're going to print out a copy of this for every candidate so that each person has their own individual page and they're not side by side as you're scoring one. Once you score one, you put it off to the side and it has no influence or impact whatsoever on the next person. You're not evaluating each candidate against the other candidates. You're evaluating each candidate against a standard that you have set. And after you've done all the interviews, you want to be able to see which candidate comes the closest to the standard that you've set. So this particular person from some semester in the past can put the candidate's name, there is a score that's associated with the candidate. When it's all over, they put that score up here at the end so they can just flip through and look at that score to get an initial idea of who's most qualified. There's notes here. Then there are things that they think are important. Their work experience is important. Their education is important. Their ability to work in teams, their customer service, how they handle conflict, goal setting, making mistakes, recognizing them, managing them, organization and how they prioritize things, how they visualize their success, their interest in the company, their verbal skills, other kinds of things. And this is what we would call a behaviorally anchored rating scale. Every one of these things has a point value from 1 to 5. 1 to 5, you see all the way down, 1 to 5, 1 to 5. And they have actually put an example of what that looks like. So as they're listening, as they're reading this resume, they can say which one of these seems to be most appropriate in terms of their experience. And as they go through, they circle these things. And then afterwards, they can just add up 2 plus 5 plus 3 plus 4 plus 3 comes to a total. All right, so that's one variation of what yours might look like. Another variation is this one. What date did you do the interview? Who was it? What's the position for? Who's doing the interview? And ideally, you ought to be able to take this, get together with a bunch of people and agree on what's important. Print one of these things for everybody. And if 4 different people interview Joe for this job, all 4 people have this form that they're using in the same way. So this person says, we're going to score everything on a 1 to 5 scale. Here's the category. Here's the thing. So was the resume concise or well written? Does it show that they have the appropriate skills, the appropriate experience, the appropriate education? Is it consistent from top to bottom in terms of format, errors? They don't specifically say errors, but that's part of consistent perhaps. As I'm reading the resume, maybe there's also a question or a category that talks about the cover letter. And I say, you know, that's a 4, that's a 4, that's a 5, that's a 3, that's a 3, and I score from 1 to 5. Then they get into the interview here. And I would suggest in yours that you actually type the questions or copy and paste the questions into this block here, this block here, this block here. So you don't need your questions sitting next to this form. You just use this form. That takes longer space on this form. Here you can put in notes. Here you can put in the rating of 1 to 5. And I would suggest that you design this thing to where you don't have a block here that's got a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5 in your circle. That takes up space that you don't need. All you got to do is to put the number here. So this column maybe has a smaller heading on it. This is right now set up at 11 point. If this was 8 or something really small, you could make this column real thin. You don't need much space here to write a number, but you do want some space to make some notes, and you do want to have enough space here to where you can make the process easy for you. So in this particular person's estimation, things related to the resume are important. Things related to the interview questions I asked are important. How they behaved in the interview is important. What happened after the interview is important. I think it's always important to say intangibles because you just may have a gut feeling about somebody, and that's worth something. That doesn't need to be the only reason you hire them. But if you got 2 that are equal, did you feel better about one than the other? Maybe you can't really put your finger on it. You just had this sense. So intangible is important. And then with all of these numbers, they would come up with a score. Now, it's also possible that you say, you know what, body language is not the same thing as articulate. It's more important to be articulate. So maybe you say, this is scored from 1 to 5, but I'm going to double it and it becomes a 2 or a 10, where this one is only a 1 or a 5. So you might want to put in if they're weighted differently. All right. Well, that's 2 examples of how you might design this thing. Again, I don't want you going to one as a template and just changing the wording, because I want you to start by thinking about what's important and get you a notebook pad where you can just make little stars or little dots, bullets going down and say, this is important, this is important, this is important, this is important, this is important. And then say, how am I going to decide what the proper rating is? These all tie to the resume. This ties to the actual interaction of the interview. This ties to question 1. And it may be overall, did they answer question 1 from 1 to 5, horrible to great? Or maybe you say it's really important that they can work in teams. That ties back to question 2. However you do it, is going to be right for you. But the point of this assignment, the point of this exercise, is to create some sort of a document or a form that you can print and you can lay down on the table in front of you as you're doing your interview. And as you hear things, you glance down, you read a question, and you shut up and you listen. And as you listen, you get ideas and you jot down an idea. And by the time the thing is over, this is hard to do in an interview. It's hard to score that thing 1 to 5 while you're going to the next question. Maybe you forget about the scoring. You just take notes as best you can. And when the conversation is over and you've disconnected from the call, then you go back and you think about those questions and say, that was a 5, that was a 4. Gosh, I don't remember that one. I wish I'd taken better notes. So I'm going to give them a 3 just to be fair, whatever. But you score them after the fact, maybe. Maybe you can score them as you go. But again, the point of the hiring matrix, whether it exists on paper or it exists in your mind, I say it's better on paper because you might forget something in your mind. If it's on paper, you got to account for it somehow. But the purpose of that, the value of that hiring matrix, is that you know when the interview starts what you're looking for and what you need to make a decision on in order to make an overall decision. You've got to make a decision, one candidate to the next candidate to the next candidate, on how they answer this question about working in teams, whatever the question is. You need to make a decision one by one by one, how well they communicate in their resume, how complete they are, how well they can express their ideas as they answer questions, as they put things in their cover letter. Each one of those individual questions has to be answered. And as you answer the individual questions, if you got the right questions, not just the physical questions that you're asking in the interview, but in your head, the questions you're trying to get the answers to as to whether they can do the essential functions and whether they have the KSAOs. All of those individual questions, as they get their answers, build together to answer the big overarching question about, can this person do it? Which one of these 4 is the best, the most likely to be successful at doing it? That's what you're trying to get in your hiring matrix. So for this assignment, think about those 2 examples. You want to go back and replay the video? You can, but I would encourage you, don't pause the video so you can furiously write down what that is. Get a concept of what this thing might look like and build your own. If you build it in Excel, that's fine. If you build it in Word, that's fine. Both of those 2 examples I showed you were in Word, but you can do it any way you want to. Maybe you just scratch it out on a piece of paper right away. What you're going to give me in the Dropbox is either a Word file or an Excel file that I can go in and look. And I'm going to give you some feedback. It doesn't look like from what you gave me that this is important to you as you make a decision. If this is important, build it in there somewhere. You've put this in there. I don't see the relevance. Why are you trying to evaluate this? Is that ultimately going to help you make a decision about who's best? So I'm going to give you feedback like that. Now, with the job description, I wanted you to make some changes and give me a version B. With the interview questions and the hiring matrix, you make changes, you don't make changes. I don't care. It's up to you at that point. You've got to get through the interview. You've got to make a decision. But if you insist on what I think are flaws, that's fine. As long as you can get to the outcome of hiring the person you think is best, it doesn't matter. I want to give you feedback to help you have a better process, to help you have a better experience. And hopefully that's what you're going to get. So for the hiring matrix, think about the content more than you think about the structure. The structure we can build in later. If the content's wrong, the structure doesn't matter. If the content is right, the structure helps you get the content towards the decision that you have to make. So come up with the content of your hiring matrix, play around a little bit with a structure, but give me more so the content. Then as I get the content from you and give you feedback on that, I can give you those 2 examples and you can figure out which one of those 2 works best for you, or you can go with something completely different. And it may be that you give me a format for the thing. I go, this is great. I'm going to share this with future classes. I don't know. Hopefully this has helped you. 14 minutes in, maybe your picture in your head is crystal clear now as to what you need to do for this matrix. I want you to succeed, not just on this assignment and not just in this class, but when you get into the real world and start interviewing people, I want you to know how to do it right. And I really am passionate about the concept that you become so very, very good at interviewing that people in your organization come to you and go, you get a good hire every time you do it. Teach me how to do it because I'm doing it wrong. You're the expert. That's what I want you to be. I want you to come out of this class having confidence in the hiring process and doing it right so that you don't just fill a hole somewhere that you're going to have to fill again 6 months from now or a year from now when they leave, but that you fill a hole with somebody who has an impact right away and who stays for a long time. That's what we're looking for. Good deal. Go get them. Let me know if I can help you. Otherwise, looking forward to seeing what you submit.